In merry England, in the time of old when good King Richard ruled the land, there lived within the green glades of Sherwood Forest, near Nottingham town, a famous outlaw whose name was Robin Hood. No archer ever lived that could speed a grey goose shaft with such skill and cunning as his, nor were there ever such yeomen as the 70 merry men that roamed with him through the greenwood shades. Right merrily they dwelt within the depths of Sherwood Forest, suffering neither care nor want, but passing the time in merry games of archery and bouts of cudgel play, living upon the king's venison, washed down with draughts of ale of October brewing. Not only Robin himself, but all the band were outlaws, and lived apart from other men. Yet they were beloved by the country people round about, for no one ever came to jolly Robin for help in time of need, and went away again with an empty fist. Some of Robin Hood's band had shot the king's deer in hungry winter time when they could get no other food. Some had been turned out of their inheritance, that their farms might be added to the king's lands in Sherwood Forest. Some had been despoiled by a great baron or a rich abbot or a powerful esquire, all for one cause or another had come to Sherwood to escape wrong and oppression. Then they vowed that even as they themselves had been despoiled, they would despoil their oppressors, and that from each they would take that which had been wrung from the poor by unjust taxes or land rents or wrongful fines. But to the poor folk they would give a helping hand in need and trouble, and would return that which had been unjustly taken from them. Besides all this, they vowed never to harm a child, nor to wrong a woman, so that after a while, when the people began to find that no harm was meant to them, but that money and food came in time of want to many a poor family, they came to praise Robin and his merry men, and to tell many tales of his doings in Sherwood Forest, for they felt him to be one of themselves.
was about 20 years old, with a hey down, down, and a down, he happened to meet little John, a jolly brisk blade, right fit for the trade, for he was a lusty young man. Old Robin Hood said to his jolly bowmen, with a hey down, down, and a down, pray tarry you here in this grove, and see that you all observe well my call, while through the forest I rove. We have had no sport for these 14 long days, with a hey down, down, and a down, therefore now abroad I will go. But should I be beat and cannot retreat, my horn I will presently blow.
Up rose Robin Hood one merry morn, when all the birds were singing blithely among the trees. And taking leave of his merry men, he strode away through the leafy forest glades, until he had come to the verge of Sherwood. There he wandered for a long time, through highway and byway, through Dingley Dell and forest skirts. Once he met a fair buxom lass in a shady lane. Once a fair lady upon an ambling palfrey. And once a gallant knight with spear and shield and armor that flashed brightly in the sunlight. All these he saw, but adventure found he none. At last he took a road by the forest skirts, a bypath that dipped toward a broad, pebbly stream spanned by a narrow bridge made of a log of wood. As he drew nigh this bridge, he saw a tall stranger coming from the other side. Thereupon Robin quickened his pace, as did the stranger likewise, each thinking to cross first.
They happened to meet on a long, narrow bridge, with a hey down, down, and a down, and neither of them would give way. Quoth bold Robin Hood, and sturdily stood, I'll show ye right Nottingham play. With that from his quiver an arrow he drew, with a hey down, down, and a down, a broad arrow with a goose wing. The stranger replied, I'll liquor thy hide, if thou offer to touch the string. Robin Hood, thou dost prate like an ass, with a hey down, down, and a down, for were I to bend but my bow, I could send a dart quite through thy proud heart, before thou couldst strike me one blow. You talk like a coward, the stranger replied, with a hey down, down, and a down, well armed with a longbow you stand, to shoot at my breast, while I protest, have naught but a staff in my hand.
So Robin Hood stepped quickly to the coverside, and cut a good staff of ground oak, 6 feet in length, and came back, trimming away the tender stems from it, while the stranger waited for him, leaning upon his own staff. Robin observed him furtively, measuring him from top to toe from out the corner of his eye, and thought that he had never seen a lustier or a stouter man. Tall was Robin, but taller was the stranger by a head and a neck, for he was 7 feet in height. Broad was Robin across the shoulders, but broader was the stranger by twice the breadth of a palm. Nevertheless, said Robin to himself, I will baste thy hide right merrily, my good fellow.
Lo, see my staff, it is lusty and tough, with a hey down, down, and a down. Now here on this bridge we will play. Whoever falls in, the other shall win the battle, and so we'll away. With all my whole heart to thy humor I yield, with a hey down, I scorn in the least to give out. This said, they fell to it without more dispute, and their staffs they did flourish about.
In a moment, Robin stepped quickly upon the bridge where the stranger stood, and delivered a blow at the stranger's head that would have tumbled him speedily into the water. But the stranger turned the blow, and for a good hour they fought fiercely. At last, Robin struck a blow so shrewd that the stranger came within a hair's breadth of falling off the bridge. But he regained himself, and gave Robin a crack on the crown that caused the blood to flow. Once again the stranger thwacked Robin, and this time so fairly that he fell heels over head into the water. "And where art thou now, good lad?" roared the stranger with laughter. "Oh, in the flood, and floating down with the tide," cried Robin. And nor could he forbear laughing himself at his sorry plight. Then gaining his feet, he waded to the bank, the little fish swimming hither and thither, all frightened at his splashing. "Give me thy hand," cried he when he reached the bank. "By this and by that, my head hummeth like to a hive of bees on a hot June day." Then he clapped his horn to his lips, and winded a blast that went echoing sweetly down the forest paths. And now the distant twigs and branches rustled with the coming of men, and suddenly a score or two of good stout yeomen, all clad in Lincoln green, burst from out the covert, with merry Will Stuteley at their head.
"Oh, what is the matter?" quoth bold Will Stuteley, with a hey down, down and a down. "Good master, you're wet to the skin." "No matter," quoth he, "the lad which you see in fighting hath tumbled me in." "He shall not go scot-free," the others replied, with a hey down, down and a down. So straight they were seizing him there, to duck him likewise, but Robin Hood cries, "He is a stout fellow, forbear."
"Nay, forbear," cried Robin, laughing until his sore sides ached again. "Now, good youth, wilt thou stay with me, and be one of my band? 3 suits of Lincoln green shalt thou have each year. Thou shalt eat sweet venison and quaff the stoutest ale, and mine own good right-hand man shalt thou be. Speak, wilt thou join me?" "That I know not," quoth the stranger. "If ye handle a yew bow no better than ye do an oaken cudgel, I think you're not fit to be called yeoman." "By my faith," said Robin, "thou art a right saucy varlet, sirrah. Good Stuteley, cut thou a fair white piece of bark, and set it 80 yards distant on yonder oak. Now, stranger, hit that fairly, and call thyself an archer." "Aye, marry, that will I," he replied. Then he chose the stoutest bow amongst them all, next to Robin's own, and a straight grey goose shaft, and stepping to the mark, he loosed the arrow right deftly, so that it clove the mark in the very center. "Ha ha!" cried he, "mend thou that, if thou canst." "That is a keen shot indeed," quoth Robin. "Mend it I cannot, but mar it I may, perhaps." Then taking up his own good stout bow, and nocking an arrow with care, he shot with his very greatest skill. Straight flew the arrow, and so true, that it lit fairly upon the stranger's shaft, and split it into splinters. Then all the yeomen leaped to their feet, and shouted for joy that their master had shot so well. "Now that is a shot indeed," cried the stranger. "Never saw I the like in all my life before. Good Adam Bell was a fair hand with the bow, but never shot he so. Truly will I be thy man, henceforth and for aye. Then have I gained a right good man this day," quoth jolly Robin.
"Oh, here is my hand," the stranger replied, with a hey down, down and a down. "I'll serve you with all my whole heart. My name is John Little, a man of good metal. Ne'er doubt me, for I'll play my part." "His name shall be altered," quoth bold Will Stuteley, with a hey down, down and a down, "and I will his godfather be. Prepare then a feast, and none of the least, for we will be merry," quoth he.
"What name goest thou by, good fellow?" asked Robin. "Men call me John Little," answered the stranger. But Will Stuteley, who loved a good jest, spoke up. "Nay, fair little stranger," said he, "I like not thy name, and would have it otherwise. Therefore, shalt thou be christened Little John, and I will be thy godfather." Then Robin Hood and all his band laughed aloud until the stranger began to grow angry. "Nay, good friend," said Robin Hood, "the name fitteth thee well. Little John shall thou be called henceforth." So they plunged into the forest once more, through which they traced their steps till they reached the spot where they dwelt in the depths of the woodland. Here stood a great oak tree with branches spreading broadly around, and there they found the rest of the band, some of whom had prepared a feast and broached a barrel of ale. When this feast was done, Will Stuteley spoke again. "It is now time to christen our bonny babe. Is it not so, merry boys?" Then Will Scarlet and 6 stout yeomen all ran upon him at once, seizing him by his legs and arms and holding him tightly in spite of his struggles. Then one stepped forward who had been chosen to play the part of the priest because he had a bald crown, and in his hand he carried a brimming pot of ale. "Now, who bringeth this babe?" asked he right soberly. "That do I," answered Will Stuteley. "And what name callest thou him?" "Little John call I him." "Now, Little John," quoth the mock priest, "Little John shalt thou be called, and so I christen thee." And at these last words he emptied the pot of ale upon Little John's head. Then all shouted with laughter as they saw the good brown ale stream over Little John's beard and trickle from his nose and chin, while his eyes blinked with the smart of it. At first he was of a mind to be angry, but found that he could not, because the others were so merry, and so he too laughed with the rest. And thus it was that Robin Hood gathered about him a band of merry companions, and thus it was that he gained his right-hand man, Little John.
Then music and dancing did finish the day, with a hey down, down and a down. At length, when the sun waxed low, the hour being late, they left that fair place, and unto their caves they did go. And so ever after, as long as he lived, with a hey down, down and a down. Although he was proper and tall, still nevertheless the truth to express, Little John they did him call. as the Sheriff of Nottingham was come with mickle grief, he talked no good of Robin Hood, that strong and sturdy thief. So on to London rode he, past his losses to unfold, to King Richard, who did regard the tale that he had told.
The Sheriff of Nottingham bade all his servants and retainers to make ready to go to London town to see and speak with the king. So forth they started in the bright sunlight and journeyed for 2 days, until they saw at last the spires and towers of that great town. In London the king and his fair queen held their court, and thither came the sheriff, and was shown into the king's presence. "O my lord and sovereign," spake the sheriff, "in Sherwood Forest, in our own good shire of Nottingham, liveth a bold outlaw, whose name is Robin Hood. I sent a warrant to him, with thine own royal seal attached, but he waylaid the messenger and stole the warrant. And he killeth thine own deer, and robbeth thine own subjects, even upon the great highways."
Why, quoth the king, what shall I do? Art thou not sheriff for me? The law is in force, go take thy course of them that injure thee. Go get thee gone, and by thyself devise some tricking game. For to enthrall yon rebels all, go take thy course with them.
So the sheriff turned away with a sore and troubled heart, and rode slowly back to Nottingham, thoughtful and full of care. Then, of a sudden, it came to him like a flash, that were he to proclaim a great shooting match and offer some grand prize, Robin Hood might be over-persuaded by his spirit to come and shoot. So as soon as he had returned to Nottingham, he sent messengers north and south, and east and west, to proclaim through town, hamlet, and countryside this grand match. And everyone was bidden that could draw a longbow. And the prize was to be an arrow of pure beaten gold.
So an arrow with a golden head and shaft of silver white, who on the day should bear away for his own proper right. Tidings came to brave Robin Hood under the greenwood tree. Come prepare ye then, my merry men, we'll go yon sport to see.
Robin Hood had first heard the news of all this in Lincoln town, and hastening back to Sherwood Forest, he soon gathered all his merry men about him and spoke to them thus. "Our friend the Sheriff of Nottingham hath proclaimed a shooting match, and the prize is to be a bright golden arrow. Now I would have one of us win it, both because of the fairness of the prize, and because our sweet friend the sheriff hath offered it. So we will take our bows and go there to shoot, for I know right well that merriment will follow. What say ye, lads?"
With that stepped forth a brave young man, David of Doncaster. "Master," said he, "be ruled by me, from the greenwood will not stir. To tell the truth, I'm well informed, yon match it is a while. The sheriff he wis devises this, us archers to beguile."
Then young David of Doncaster spoke again. "Listen, I pray thee, good master, unto what I say. I have come straight from the Blue Boar Inn, and there I heard the full news of this same match. This knavish sheriff hath but laid a trap for thee in this shooting match, and wishes nothing so much as to see thee there. So go not, for I know he doth seek to beguile thee. Stay within the greenwood, lest we all meet dole and woe. Thou art a wise lad, quoth Robin, who keepest thine ears open and thy mouth shut, as becometh a wise and crafty woodsman. But shall we let it be said that the Sheriff of Nottingham did frighten bold Robin Hood and the fairest archers in all merry England? Nay, good David, what thou tellest me maketh me to desire the prize even more than else I should do. Therefore, we must meet guile with guile. Now, some of you clothe yourselves as curtal friars, and some as rustic peasants, and some as tinkers or as beggars, but see that each man taketh a good bow or broadsword, in case need should arise. As for myself, I will shoot for this same golden arrow, and should I win it, we will hang it to the branches of our good greenwood tree, for the joy of all the band. How like you the plan, my merry men all?
Forth from the greenwood they are gone, with hearts all firm and stout, resolving then with the sheriff's men to have a hearty bout. So themselves they mixed with the rest to prevent all suspicion. For if they should together hold, they thought it no discretion.
A fair sight was Nottingham town on the day of the match. All along upon the green meadow beneath the town wall stretched a row of benches, one above the other, which were for knight and lady, squire and dame, and rich burghers and their wives, for none but those of rank and quality were to sit there. And at the end of the range, near the target, was a raised seat, bedecked with ribbons and garlands of flowers for the Sheriff of Nottingham and his dame. Never were such a company of yeomen as were gathered at Nottingham that day. The very best archers in England had come, and many famous men of the longbow were there, whose names have been handed down to us in goodly ballads of the olden time. Then the sheriff, looking keenly among this press of archers, leaned forward to find whether Robin Hood was amongst them. But no one was there clad in Lincoln green, such as was worn by Robin Hood and his band.
So the sheriff, looking round about amongst 800 men, but could not see the sight that he had long expected then. I, quoth the sheriff, and scratched his head, I thought he would have been here. I thought he would, but though he's bold, he durst not now appear.
And so now the archers shot, each man in his turn, and the good folk never saw such archery as was done that day. At last, but 10 men were left of all those that had shot before. And of these, 9 were famous throughout the land. But the 10th was a tall, tattered stranger in scarlet, who wore a patch over one eye. Now, seest thou Robin Hood amongst those 10? Quoth the sheriff to a man-at-arms who stood near him. Nay, that do I not, your worship, replied the man. Robin's beard is yellow as gold, while yon tattered beggar in scarlet hath a beard of brown, besides being blind of one eye. At last, this tattered stranger stepped forth, and all the people laughed to see his patched-up clothes, and to see him aim with but one eye. The stranger stood still, holding his bow in his hand while one could count 5. Then he drew, holding it drawn but a moment, and loosed the string. Straight flew the arrow, and all shouted till the very flags that waved in the breeze shook with the sound, and the rooks and daws flew clamoring about the roofs of the old grey tower. Straight flew the arrow, and so true that it smote a grey goose feather from off a shaft in the target, which fell fluttering through the sunlit air, as the stranger's arrow lodged in the very center.
So the arrow with a golden head and shaft of silver white, the stranger won and bore with him for his own proper right. The merry band assembled were under the greenwood shade, where they report in pleasant sport what brave pastime they made.
It was a right motley company that gathered about the noble greenwood tree in Sherwood's depths that same day. A score and more of barefoot friars were there, and some that looked like tinkers, and some that seemed to be sturdy beggars and peasants. And seated upon a mossy couch was one clad in tattered scarlet, with a patch over one eye, and in his hand was a bright golden arrow. Then, amidst a noise of talking and laughter, Robin Hood took the patch from off his eye and stripped away the scarlet rags from off his body and showed himself all clothed in fair Lincoln green. Quoth he, "Easy come these things away, but walnut stain cometh not so speedily from yellow hair." When their feasting was done, Robin Hood took Little John apart and said to him, "Truly I am vexed in my blood, for I would fain have the sheriff know who it was who won the golden arrow from out his hand." Then Little John said, "Good master, take thou me and Will Stuteley. We will send yon sheriff news of all this."
Says Robin Hood, "All my care is how that yon sheriff may know certainly that it was I that bore his arrow away. This I advise," says Little John, "that a letter shall be penned, and when it is done to Nottingham, it to the sheriff I'll send."
That day the sheriff sat at a feast in the great hall of his house at Nottingham town. "By my troth," said he, "I did reckon full roundly that knave Robin Hood would be at the game today. I did not think he was such a coward. But who could that ragged stranger be who won the prize so bravely?" Then, even as he finished speaking, something fell rattling among the dishes on the table, and those that sat near started up, wondering what it might be. It was a blunted grey goose shaft, with a fine scroll tied near to its head. The sheriff opened the scroll and glanced at it, and the veins upon his forehead swelled, and his cheeks grew ruddy with rage as he read, for this was what he saw. "Now heaven bless thy grace this day, say all in sweet Sherwood, for thou didst give the prize away to merry Robin Hood."